No Masters, no PGA Championship, not even the US Open, the one major that's eluded him his entire career, sitting out this weekend for the first time in decades. One tournament all season. That's it. And every time someone asked why, the answer was the same three words, a private matter. But here's what private doesn't cover: a resignation from a club near San Diego, a woman's account of what happened on that course, and a lawyer, his lawyer, now threatening to sue over what he calls misinformation. Three separate facts. None of them add up to an explanation on their own. Together, they raise a question nobody in golf media has fully answered. How does a six-time major champion disappear from the sport for an entire season and still end up more talked about than the players competing for it? By the end of this video, one detail from his own club's statement is going to change how you read everything that came before it. So here's what I want to know first. When a legend goes quiet like this, is it guilt hiding or is it strategy? Drop your answer below and hit subscribe, because this story has layers most people are skipping past entirely. Let's start with the season itself, because that's where the layers begin. Phil Mickelson turned 55 this year, at an age when most legends are doing ceremonial tee shots and reunion rounds. He skipped almost the entire schedule. One LIV event, a tie for 48th, then nothing. No public statement beyond family health matter. A phrase vague enough to mean almost anything, and specific enough that nobody wanted to push too hard on a man dealing with something personal. That restraint made sense. For a while, reporters backed off. Fans assumed the worst was medical or personal and left it alone out of basic decency. Then a name showed up that had nothing to do with health. The Farms Golf Club and Family Health Matter stopped being the only phrase attached to Phil Mickelson this year. Here's what actually happened at the Farms. According to Golf Digest, a female employee at the club says Mickelson approached her in the clubhouse before a round and made what the report describes as non-consensual and inappropriate physical contact. She rejected it, and instead of letting it disappear, the way these moments sometimes do inside private clubs, she reported it to her supervisors. The club didn't sit on it. Management opened an investigation, and while Mickelson was still out on the course playing, they confronted him mid-round. He was told plainly to leave the premises. Then came the club's official statement, the one written carefully enough that every word in it feels deliberate. Following a staff member report of member misconduct, the club provided immediate and ongoing support to the staff member, conducted a thorough independent investigation, and took decisive action. Read that again. Three words in that statement do something the rest of it doesn't. And almost nobody who covered this story stopped to ask why they're there at all. Mickelson didn't stay quiet on this one. Not this time. His attorney, Tom Clare, a defamation lawyer brought in specifically for cases like this, issued a statement pushing directly back against the club's version of events. There is a great deal of misinformation circulating, Clare said, adding that Mickelson is prepared to hold accountable any publication that gets the story wrong. And then came the claim that changed the entire shape of this story. Clare says video evidence exists. Footage, he claims, that clears Mickelson entirely. That's not a denial. That's a direct challenge. Put up the tape, and this ends. Except the Farms Golf Club says there's no tape to put up. According to their own account, no camera footage of the alleged incident exists at all. So one side is pointing to evidence that supposedly proves his innocence. The other side says that evidence was never recorded in the first place. So who do you believe when both sides sound this certain? A spokesperson for Mickelson tried to soften the standoff, telling Golf Digest that any misunderstanding has been cleared up, while adding that Phil is still focused on his family matter and unsure when or if he'll return to competition this year. That's a strange thing to say about a case your own lawyer just called ready for a lawsuit. Meanwhile, the Farms confirmed the part that's hardest to spin either direction. Mickelson is no longer a member, not suspended, not under review, gone. Whatever happened on that course, it was serious enough to end a membership at one of the most exclusive clubs in Southern California. The same club where players like Annika Sorenstam and Xander Schauffele still tee it up today. So who's lying here? Maybe nobody is. Not entirely. Maybe both sides are telling a version of the truth that only makes sense from where they're standing. And that's exactly why this story refuses to end cleanly. That's the real question sitting underneath all of this, not whether Phil Mickelson is guilty or innocent, but whether a story like this can even be judged fairly when the two people who know the truth are the only two people talking. So tell me where you land. Do you believe the club's version or his lawyers? Or is it possible neither side is giving you the full picture? Drop your verdict in the comments right now. And if this breakdown is doing what it's supposed to, hit subscribe, because the next layer of this story is exactly why you won't want to miss where we're going. Because here's the thing about Phil Mickelson. This isn't the first time his name has ended up next to a scandal that wasn't technically his. Years ago, a stockbroker named Gregory Silveira got caught up in a federal money laundering case. Mickelson owed close to $3 million to an offshore gambling operation and asked Silveira to help move the payment. Silveira wired it. The feds caught Silveira. He went to prison. Mickelson was never charged with anything. Clean, legally, but the pattern was already there. Phil Mickelson, standing right next to the fire, somehow never the one who gets burned. That's one name. There are two more you need to hear before this starts to look less like coincidence and more like a habit. The second name is Bones Mackay, Mickelson's caddy for 25 years, long enough that people on tour genuinely thought of them as brothers. Then, without any public explanation, they stopped speaking entirely. Mackay has never detailed what happened. To this day, he simply won't discuss it. The third name is Ashley Perez. She and her husband were close with the Mickelsons for years, until a night in 2015, she says, changed everything between them. An incident serious enough that her husband, Pat, later said on a podcast that he carries a different hate for Phil than most people, and that whatever happened crossed a line he calls unforgivable. 3 separate stories, 3 separate decades, and in every single one, the same name sits at the center. Never quite the one held responsible, always the one everyone's still talking about. But somewhere in the middle of all these stories, there's a statement that doesn't fit the pattern at all, because it isn't about scandal, it's about his family. Amy Mickelson, his wife of over 30 years, released her own words earlier this year, separate from any lawyer, any club, any headline. She said no article and no book could ever tell the complete story of what her family has lived through. She talked about recovery, calling it not a straight line, but something they've walked through together with what she described as extraordinary grace. She said Phil's priority right now is simply to become the husband and father his family deserves. That statement wasn't written to win an argument. It reads like something written to close a chapter quietly away from lawyers and headlines entirely. It didn't stay closed for long, because within weeks of that statement, the Farms Golf Club story broke, and suddenly the private recovery Amy described was sitting next to a public misconduct allegation, a lawyer threatening a lawsuit, and a club confirming he was no longer welcome. 2 narratives running at the same time, both technically true. One says a man is quietly rebuilding his family after years of struggle. The other says that same man was just asked to leave a golf course over how he treated a woman who worked there. Golf fans are being asked to hold both of those at once, and most people simply can't. Which brings us back to something we haven't finished yet, that club statement, the one with 3 words in it that don't quite match the rest. Go back and read the club's statement one more time. Not the whole thing, just quasi, just 3 words, took decisive action. That phrase never says what the action was. It doesn't say fired. It doesn't say banned. It doesn't say resigned. It's the vaguest possible way to describe something serious enough to end a 30-year connection to one of the most exclusive clubs in the country. And vague on purpose, because the moment the club gets specific, they open themselves up to exactly the lawsuit Mickelson's attorney is already threatening. Compare that to Tom Clare's version, where Mickelson resigned, his choice, his timing, his decision to walk away. Same event, 2 completely different stories, and the only thing standing between them is a single word neither side wants to say out loud. So here's where this actually leaves us. A man who resigned on his own terms, or a man who was removed and handed a softer word to save face, a recovering husband rebuilding his family exactly like his wife described, or a pattern that's followed him for 30 years finally catching up in public. Both versions exist right now, sitting on top of each other, and golf as a sport hasn't figured out which one it's willing to believe. Maybe that's not actually a question about Phil Mickelson anymore. Maybe it's a question about how much benefit of the doubt gets extended to someone once they've spent 30 years being called a legend. So here's what I actually want from you, not just an opinion this time. Tell me who you are while you're giving it. What's your age and what city are you watching from? I want to know exactly who this story is landing with because I have a feeling the answer splits generations right down the middle. Comment below with your verdict, your age, and your city. And if this is the kind of story you want broken down properly instead of screamed about in a headline, subscribe now because this isn't the last name on that list we're going to dig into.